So welcome to Schumacher Racing, where you join me, Dave Foster, with Trish Neal to talk about the new CAT L1R. So Trish, your new little beastie, how long has it been in development?
It's been about 2 years, and we've been running it a lot more at the track than we normally would, and that allows us to really develop the product a lot more than you would if you did it just with testing in the background.
All right, cool. So what are the key changes that you've made to the L1R over the Evo?
Yep, the key changes, so they're probably categories. So you've got the performance of the car, which is always one, and there's durability. Those two areas kind of link up in different ways. The one bit starting cosmetically, having a look at it, we've got the JConcepts body shell on it now, which is a great addition. It's got fantastic style to it, so it's brilliant to work with those guys on the platform. After that, we've changed bits on the geometry of the car, so the quarters as well as the transmission, even the battery mounting has had its changes. There's a lot of small changes on this car that you wouldn't spot if you don't know the brand that well, but if you go and build the car, you'll notice big changes.
You can see the car looks a lot thinner at the back. Is it a bit sleeker?
It is a bit sleeker. We have a tapering here on the car. That came from some good testing that we did, kind of based on thoughts over the years and then trying it at the track. What we found is where we had kind of more square finish there, we were getting wear marks from the track. So on AstroTurf especially, the AstroTurf picks up the rubber from the tyres, that then sticks to the chassis. And what we wondered was, how would the car feel if we remove that area? Is it going to let it roll more? Because we have bumps on these tracks that we race on our side, and it allows the car to go through those bumpy bits without it hitting. And what we learnt was that we started having more of a black mark develop around the chassis. So the chassis is allowing itself to roll more, and that's always a good indicator if you're generating, roll in the corner equally. And so that's been brilliant. When you come to dirt and carpet racing, where the car's loading up, again, that squared off section isn't hitting the ground anymore. So that's been a really good change for us, and also gives it a great look. It's lighter as well, so that's kind of a quite cool feature that I'm looking forward to everyone using.
And obviously because of that difference, the lipos had to move further forward?
Yeah, so this is actually a combined change. We always liked running more weights at the front of the car before, which we think, okay, fine, you can either add some weight or shift the electrics forwards, move the battery far forward as you can. And what we felt was actually we can go further forward than we thought. So we were 9mm further back on the old car in its forward position. Now our forward position is that amount, so 9mm further forward lipo, and actually our rear position, on this is the same as the old car's forward position, which we lived on. We never moved it back, and if you do, it makes the car pendulum a bit more. The forward drive seems to really benefit of more forward weight distribution. So now doing that, we had to modify the motor mounts. So you'll see that this bit here, where the top deck is a bit higher. And that allows us to get full-size lipos in. So if you're racing in Germany doing 7-minute finals, or you're racing stock, you'll be able to run those large full-height lipos in there, which would be great. And that's a change that has been a big beneficial thing to the guys when they've run with it. Excellent,
excellent. So the transmission, any changes there?
Yes, there's the motor mount, that's the first step, but coupled to that we have a new, let's call it lay shaft system. Before we had squares that the slipper clutch kind of connected up to transfer that drive from the spur gear and the slipper mechanism. Now we've gone to two flats. The benefit of that is there's actually more of a radius available to then centralise and make things run more concentrically and true. And that means things run more quietly, more efficiently, and that's great. Then on the other side of it, you then have the small gear that goes on. Again, that gets mounted really concentrically, so that's excellent. One of the best bits of it is it's an aluminium lay shaft with an M4 nut on the end. The benefit of that is it's towards like a third of the weight of the steel parts, which, you can't argue with that. And in regards to performance, that's only going to help us with, reducing rotating weights. Moving away to the reverse / the idler gear that we called it, that sits on a post that is fractionally longer, that allows a bit more float. The benefit of that is under load and stress and it going through all that torque that it has to go through, it has a little bit more room, so it eliminates some of the failures that we have had in the past.
And going back to the chassis,
yes,
the side pods, now not carbon, not S2?
Now the plastic.
Why the change? Yeah.
Why the change? What we found over the years is it started with carbon, went down that route, add stiffness. What we found was actually making it softer in that area, made it a bit easier to drive. Obviously, chassis stiffness is a big thing in RC car racing. We went to S2, which was again more flexible. We then moved that step along. We've gone to plastic now. There's barely any section. There's a little L section of plastic running its way around, and that allows us to have an even more flexible car. It also has a nice finish to it, you know, with the way that the side pod comes down and tucks in really nicely there. When you mount it as well, we have, not that you can see here, but elongated slots for some of the positions to stop any shrinkage from the plastic causing any trouble there. You can have it where plastic parts bolt to a piece of aluminium and make it bend. So this eliminates any extra stresses that could be added from any shrinkage issues or anything in production. So we could actually try different stiffnesses of plastic if we wanted to.
Tell us about the front quarters of the car. New wishbones, new hub carriers.
That's correct. So we have a top-hat bush system on the outboard end, which adds a lot of durability to the car. That couples onto the new hub carrier, which is quite an exciting thing for the racer because we have screw-on arms. It's a carbon fibre piece, and we'll be able to move the pickup point of the steering into the wheel, out of the wheel, wherever you like it. It's an infinite amount of option with that. Going through the steering, actually, we took back to the servo. We have a floating servo mount, which you know about. If you don't, it just allows when you hit bumps and things, it can find its way. We now have a deeper pocket, or a larger pocket, that's underneath the servo. So it allows it to go down a bit further than before, which is going to help us in those moments where you get high loads and things. Moving to the central part of the front end, we have a higher front hinge pin now, which allows us to gain a bit more forward drive out of corners, make it a bit more responsive. But it's a system that allows, obviously, the rake angle on the front as well as the width. And you can go to the older, lower pin, which is something which you prefer for high-speed tracks.
So there's been a few changes to the shock absorbers as well. Can you explain a few of the differences?
Okay. In the kit, we have a sprue which has from 1.6 to 2.1 hole pistons, and that allows you to just not have to drill your pistons when you build your kit. And that includes like the bush and the top hat bush that sit inside the shock. So that's a great thing for the end user to have. So if you're racing on carpet or clay, in the kits you can build it how you like. Coupled with building things how you like, we have two different roll bars in the kit for the front. We have a 1.4 for when you're racing on low grip surfaces, clay and all that, or a 1.8 for the front, which allows you to keep the car flat out of the corners. On the rear of the car, we have a longer shock shaft. We normally set the shock shafts longer than in the kit, and we unscrew the ball cup at the end. The benefit for us now is you don't have to do that. You build it as per the kit. It's the length that you need.
So going on the rear of the car now, rear hub. Lots of changes there.
There's a big change to the rear.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, it's been pretty exciting throughout the team. They've been learning about this over the past year. We've got what we call as a wide rear end. It's not wider than the box, but the pivot's been moved. We've played with hex widths, and then that's coupled with some new hubs which have some geometry that you can adjust that you couldn't do before. The geometry on the hub that I'm talking about is the relationship between the axle and the hinge pin. You can play with the distance. Okay, so we've got different inserts which are A, B, C, D, and you can flip them around, move them around, have what you like. It's a great system, and you can play with then how the car rolls in a corner based on the wheel, because it changes the stiffness there, the way that it drives out of corners. It's quite an interesting thing. The other bits that is really cool about the top of the hub is you don't need to have a shimming system to move the position of your ball stud that we've seen. We've got 10 positions you can move without having to add any other shims or anything like that by screwing in different places or moving the plate. And that's something that I'm quite pleased with on that. And it's got a different look.
So I think that sort of covers suspension and geometry changes. Going back to the transmission, differentials, any changes, any modifications, any updates on those for the L1R?
Yeah, on the L1 Evo, we'd gone to some thicker shims that went behind the sun gears, the larger gear that's in there, and that was brilliant because the shim was changing shape before on the previous model. That fixed that issue. What we've learned through running 2-gear diffs, which instead of having 4, we have 2 gears in there, the planetary gear shims, they also change shape under that heavy loading from being rubbed. So we've actually gone to a 0.4mm thick shim, which was keep it shape, keep it flat. The other thing that we have inside the diffs, which I find it's quite cool having these things in the kit, it has a solid pin instead of having the cruciform, because what we have found is those loads are that heavy, you can break off the plastic moulded cruciform and even some of the older steel pins. So we've got an upgraded pin in there. As for the moulding, we've upgraded where we screw the 2.5mm screws in, and what we'd had before was some cracking would appear, so we've beefed up that area around there. So that's another addition there. So we're happy with that. On the front of the car, you'll see some gold outputs compared to the rear, which are black. They're a little bit longer because on the front of the car, we have a shorter drive shaft on the front. It matches the option roast drive shaft on its length, so then it means when you do your change, you're changing the joint, not just the length.
So I see the car comes with carbon fibre top deck as standard,
Yes.
and a fair number of alloy parts.
Yes.
There's also a big range of tune-up bits and bobs as well. I assume that's more for tuning the car rather than necessity.
That's right. So if you want the car to turn into the corner a bit harder, we have a new 6-degree yoke, which would be great for, you know, carpet racing or Astro if you want it to tuck in or drive out straighter. Generally the 10s is a great place to start. It's down to your driving style or the circumstance of the track. With the rest of the car, yeah, you've got your spring sets that you can put on. We've got green and blue on the car, and that's generally the springs that you would use for most situations. If you go to carpet racing, you might want something a bit harder. For clay, you might tweak it slightly, but you're not too far off. Like I said before, we have the option front roll bar in the kit. We have the option pistons in the kit. So the car's extremely close to what you want for every condition you go out on. The idea is to give you something out of the box, which is right.
I see that there's a ROS system on the options list. So when would I use that? What is it? What's it do?
Okay, a ROS is a rear-only slipper, and that allows us to have the front permanently driving, and the rear, we have a slipper controlling the rear drive, and that acts more like a centre diff. So when you go on slippery conditions and your rear is fishtailing, you can back this off, and basically you could get it to the point your front wheels are doing all the work. It becomes a two-wheel drive if you want to. You tighten it up to the point that you get that transition of the car coming out the corner with all four wheels driving, but when you're steering, it will be putting the power to the front. I'd really recommend it for those low grip conditions that you'd be racing on.
While we're on the subject of option parts, options for the stock spec guys, they're obviously racing a lot of that over in the States.
Yes.
So what can we offer?
Yep, we were very conscious of that. So we've got the slipper lockout system that goes in there. It's lighter and it eliminates the slipper. Then we have 4mm belts which reduce drag, and so it allows free rolling, much nicer for the stock motors. One of the big things, it will have a carbon chassis option for the car. Again, that will add obviously different performance characteristics going on with Flex, but it's a massive weight saving because we always have to run large lipos when we run stock. So that's a great benefit to those guys.
So that gives us pretty much a quite comprehensive overview of the new CAT L1R from Schumacher.
Yes.
Thanks, Trish, for all your input. For any more information, check out www.racing-cars.com. Thanks for watching.
See you later.